She had spent 30 years building a life that looked unbreakable, until, at 58, it collapsed in a single afternoon. No warning, no second chance, just a signature, a suitcase, and silence, with nothing left but a few crumpled bills and a dignity the world had tried to strip away. She made a choice no one expected. She bought an abandoned restaurant on the edge of a town that had never truly accepted her. But what happened next wasn't just about starting over. It revealed something darker, something buried deep beneath polite smiles and closed doors. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay in the past, and some places never forget who they were built to keep out. So why did this one decision put her directly in the path of something far more dangerous than failure? For most of her life, she had been the kind of woman people overlooked. Quiet, dependable, always holding things together, even when everything around her felt like it was falling apart. She woke up early, worked long hours, and carried the weight of a marriage that slowly erased pieces of who she used to be. In a town where faces like hers were rarely seen behind counters, only in kitchens, she learned to stay small, to avoid trouble, to survive. But survival came at a cost. By the time she turned 58, the life she had built no longer belonged to her. The divorce didn't just take her home, it took her place in a world that had never fully accepted her to begin with. Friends disappeared, doors quietly closed. And suddenly, she was alone in a place that had always made her feel like she didn't belong. That's when she found it. The old restaurant. Faded walls, broken windows, and a history no one wanted to talk about. Locals passed by without looking twice, as if pretending it didn't exist. But the moment she stepped inside, something felt off, and maybe the warning signs were already there. At first, it was just the silence, the kind that followed her every morning as she unlocked the restaurant doors, as if the building itself was watching, waiting. No customers, no curious glances, just empty streets and curtains that seemed to shift when she passed by. She told herself it would take time, that people needed to see her, to trust her, but the signs started appearing before the week was over. A note slipped under the door, no name, no warning, just a few words scrawled in harsh, uneven ink. Words that didn't belong in any welcoming place. She crumpled it, tried to ignore the way her hands trembled. The next day, it happened again, and then again. Each message sharper than the last, as if someone wanted to remind her exactly where she stood. Still, she stayed. She scrubbed the floors, repainted the walls, and forced life back into a space that had long been abandoned. For a brief moment, it felt like progress. A stranger walked in one afternoon, looked around, and sat down. Hope flickered, but it didn't last. By the end of that week, whispers had spread across town. Not loud, not open, just enough to be felt. People stopped near the entrance, glanced inside, then kept walking. A delivery order was canceled without explanation. A supplier who had agreed to help suddenly stopped answering her calls. And then came the night everything shifted. She arrived early the next morning to find the front window cracked. Not shattered, just enough damage to send a message. Her reflection stared back at her through the fractured glass, distorted, divided. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't coincidence anymore. The tension followed her everywhere now. Footsteps that slowed when she passed. Conversations that stopped the second she entered a room. Even the air inside the restaurant felt heavier. Like something unseen was pressing down on her, daring her to leave. But she didn't. Because leaving meant accepting what they wanted her to believe. That she didn't belong. That this place, this town, this life was never meant for someone like her. So she pushed forward, even as the warnings grew louder. Another note appeared, this time taped to the door for everyone to see. The words were impossible to ignore, cruel, direct, final. And just beneath it, something else, something that made her stomach drop. A symbol, one she recognized instantly, one that carried a history far darker than she had imagined. And suddenly the restaurant didn't just feel abandoned anymore. It felt claimed. The night it happened, the air felt different. Heavy, still. Like the town itself was holding its breath. She had stayed late, determined to finish what she started. The floors were clean, the lights warm, the restaurant finally beginning to feel alive. For the first time in weeks, it almost felt like hers. Then came the sound. A sharp crack followed by another. The front door rattled violently, as if someone was trying to break it down. Her body froze, heart slamming against her chest. Shadows moved outside the windows, distorted figures pacing, circling. And then it started, pounding, louder, angrier, echoing through the walls she had fought so hard to rebuild. She didn't move. Couldn't. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't random. The glass shattered. Fragments exploded across the floor as something crashed through the window. Cold air rushed in, carrying voices, low, aggressive, filled with something far worse than anger. She stumbled back, her breath caught somewhere between a scream and silence. They weren't hiding anymore. The symbol she had seen before, it was there again, marked boldly across her wall, larger this time, impossible to ignore. A message burned into the very place she had tried to call her own. Leave, or else. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, but even that felt useless, because this moment, this fear, was exactly what they wanted. To break her, to remind her that no matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she sacrificed, she would never belong. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't run. Not this time. Because something inside her shifted, something stronger than fear. Stronger than the years she had spent staying silent, staying small. As the noise outside grew louder, she stepped forward instead of back, and in that moment, everything changed. The noise didn't last forever. Eventually, the shadows disappeared. The street fell quiet again, and the night swallowed what had happened. But something had already changed. And it wasn't just the broken glass or the hateful marks left behind. It was her. She didn't leave. By morning, the damage was still there for everyone to see. The shattered window, the symbol, the message meant to push her out. But this time, something unexpected happened. People slowed down. They looked. Some walked away, but not all of them. A few stepped closer, not out of curiosity, but something heavier. Something like realization. Because what had been done to her could no longer hide behind silence. It was visible now, undeniable. And in that exposure, the truth began to shift. She cleaned the glass, repainted the walls, opened the doors again. Not because it was easy, but because leaving would have meant accepting a lie that had followed her all her life, that she didn't belong. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, the same space that once felt hostile began to change. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to prove something powerful, that resistance doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like staying when the world expects you to disappear. What happened to her didn't just leave scars. It exposed something deeper, something that still exists in quiet corners, behind polite faces in places people don't want to admit. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all. Because this isn't just her story. It's a reflection of a reality many still live every day. So the question isn't what she survived. The question is, how many others are still being pushed out, simply for daring to stay?